of the enlightening panel discussion that we have just had. Now, may I request you to deliver your keynote address? Is the rule of law backsliding in India? Our challenges for the 2020s.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, before getting into the topic, I would like to congratulate everybody, who's been involved in this fantastic report, actually. And having glanced through it, I can imagine, how difficult it must have been to come out with this report, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the subject that you're dealing with. So congratulations to everybody who's been involved, Common Cause, CSDS, Tata Trust, everybody, for a really fantastic report. And I'm looking forward to your second volume, which I hope will come out next month or maybe early June. Now, on the topic of the backsliding of the rule of law, I'd like to give policing a very wide or a broad interpretation. And in that, I would start from the beginning, actually, from the maintenance of law and order, which will include, of course, registration of FIRs, investigation and prosecution, and in some cases, post prosecution. But let me look at it from the point of view of the primary function in the beginning, the primary function of police in maintaining law and order. Now, over the last couple of years, I've been noticing, to my dismay, that the law is actually being used in a manner that I had never imagined as a student of law in the 1970s. There are gaps, silences in the Constitution, as Professor Sudhir Krishnaswamy will tell us. But there are these silences or gaps in the laws, which also, I'm afraid, are being taken advantage of by the police. Now, you have, the right to protest, for example. We've been discussing that for the last couple of years. The right to protest, how do you curb the right to protest, or what are the checks on the right to protest? So you would have the management of the right to protest or persons who are protesting, management through non-violent means. One is the imposition of Section 144. Of course, that is done through the district magistrate, but the police are involved. Now, you've had Section 144 in a couple of places in a district, maybe in a district, but in a state like UP, which is huge, you declare Section 144 in the entire state. I mean, this is something, remarkable. And it's not only as if it's happened in UP, it's happened in other states as well. So here is one area where Section 144 has, according to me, been misused. What is the value of Section 144? When is it to be utilized? Was discussed by the Supreme Court in the Ramleela incident when we had that India against corruption. It's an urgent measure, not something like a preventive measure that, all right, impose Section 144 for a month or for 2 weeks, put the entire state in, a lockdown sort of a situation. Closure of metro stations, we've had that in Delhi. When people were protesting against CAA, for example, Citizenship Amendment Act, metro stations were closed, inconveniencing persons who are going to work, inconveniencing students who are going to attend their classes. What for? Is it not possible to, manage the protest or to maintain law and order without inconveniencing people? Barricades were put up. People coming from Haryana, it took them 2 hours to come to Delhi. Why? Because the police did not want, the traffic to come towards Mandi House or wherever the protest was being taken. So you put up these barricades in the name of security and checking, so that the traffic slows down, and by the time somebody comes out of the traffic jam, 2 hours are gone, by which time the protest is also over. Picking up protesters, people who were picked up from Red Fort, people who were picked up from Mandi House. Mandi House didn't succeed too much because of the station, metro station being closed. But people from Red Fort were picked up, taken to one corner of Delhi in Burari, which is miles away, and left over there. Now, how do they come back? There's no transport from Burari to the heart of Delhi. So either you walk or you try and hitchhike. How these people come back, one doesn't know. These are all, ways and means that have been utilized, non-violent ways and means that have been utilized. Shaheen Bagh protest, one of the things that was said was that the police deliberately, I don't know whether it's true or not, but the police deliberately put up barricades in some places so that the traffic would get diverted and a person coming from Noida area would take 2 or 3 hours to come to the city. Commuters would feel frustrated and they would, put pressure and say that what is all this Shaheen Bagh thing going on? We are being inconvenienced and so on. But whether the Shaheen Bagh protesters caused all this or whether the police caused it by artificial barricades, not yet investigated. But the stories going around were that the police did it. So these are non-violent methods that are being used by the police, maybe a part of law and order, but certainly inconveniencing people in the city. It's in Delhi, it can happen in Bangalore, it can happen anywhere else. Then you have management through, violent means. Use of water cannons, okay, I suppose that's permissible. Use of tear gas, I suppose that's permissible. That's what is being used for so many years, but maybe we need to find some alternatives. Lathi charge. Now, when do you stop a lathi charge? When you go to Jamia, you go into the library and start doing a lathi charge over there. Where people are studying, you go and do a lathi charge, get those people out of that library. You had violence in JNU. Persons were identified. Some of the persons who came and attacked the students of JNU were identified. 1 year ago, if I remember correctly, 5th of January, 2020. No trace of them. Nobody knows. Their names are known, their addresses are known. They've not been picked up. So, that violence is kind of condoned, even though the identity of the persons who have perpetrated that violence is known. In the farmers' agitation, okay, you can do what you like to get the farmers out, but digging up highways, that's not the job of the police. Building a fortress, that's not the job of the police. So these are, ways in which the rule of law is being, in a sense, sabotage, maybe a slightly strong word, but that's what is, in a sense, happening. What about the judiciary and the police? What is the relationship? I think that, there's a failure on both sides and it's a little disturbing as far as I am concerned. I mentioned about registration of FIRs. Lalita Kumari's judgment given by 5 judges in 2014, not being followed. A prime example of that is the Hathras incident. The FIR was not registered. They said, you go to a doctor, go to a hospital, this, that, and the other. By that time, this girl, was almost gone, unfortunately. Investigation and prosecution. You have issues of, third-degree torture. You have this incident in Tuticorin, that father and son duo, Jairaj and Phoenix, beaten up. The judiciary failed because the magistrate did not even bother to see those people. Both of them died. Now, that's not the job of the judiciary to say that, well, because these people have committed some crime and because they've been beaten up, that's okay, I don't need to see them. That's the job of the court to see that human rights are not violated, but the judge, I'm sorry, failed in his duty. You have the Supreme Court passing a judgment saying that CCTV cameras should be installed in police stations. Why? Is there a lack of trust? Or is it that the Supreme Court knows that these are the kind of things that happen in police stations? So, I mean, right at the top, there is this suspicion that what is it that is happening? Why do we need, CCTV cameras in police stations? Confessional statements, of course, confessional statements made by the police are not accepted. But now it has been said that confessional statements made before NDPS officers, narcotic drugs persons, those also should not be accepted. Why? Because they have the police power, and you should not accept these. Again, a lack of trust or faith or a lack of faith in impartiality. DK Basu guidelines, they came probably 1998 or 1999 or something. They have to be repeated in Arnesh Kumar 2014, but still not being followed. So you had Mohammad Farooqi arrested in Bhopal, released. Why? Because Arnesh Kumar's guidelines were not followed. So what is the use of these guidelines? If they can't be enforced, or if the police say we're not going to enforce it, where is the rule of law that we are talking about? Repeated arrests, again, a thing which is happening, I'm hearing it for the first time. It happened with Mr. Chidambaram. He was in judicial custody. He said, come and examine me for whatever you want. No, we are not going to examine you. The day you get bail, we are going to come and arrest you and put you behind bars again. It happened to Mr. Chidambaram. It has happened to Akhil Gogoi in the Northeast. Patricia will know that. He gets bail in one case, he is inside for another case. He gets bail in the second case, he is inside for the third case. I think there are 8 cases or something pending against him, including UAPA cases. Deep Sidhu, day before yesterday, he got bail for participating in, a riot or something in Red Fort. He got bail. Within a couple of hours, they arrested him for damaging Red Fort. Why could they not have done the same thing at the same time? So you have these things. It's lawful, by the way. What the police is doing is lawful. But an abuse of or misuse of the law. Leaking information. Riya Chakravarti's case, we saw that day in and day out on television. Selective leak of information. But when information is required to be given to the people, it is not being given. You have persons who have been arrested for colluding with Kashmiri militants. Nobody knows what has happened to them. But you have somebody like Riya Chakravarti, day in and day out, you have information. Inflated crimes. Somebody says something, you put sedition, put UAPA. One girl says something, arrested for sedition. And what happens to her? Bangalore, for 4 months, she's in jail. A young lady, 19 years old. Now, these, again, lawful, perfectly lawful. But should it be done? Or is it correct that you should, come out with these kind of instances? Harassment of migrants. We did see that happening last year. People who are being beaten up. And what they say, at least what we used to hear in school, Murga bana diya usko, all kinds of things happening. But the police did help. I must say that to their credit, in many places, the police participated in assisting the migrants in terms of food, medicine, looking after them, and so on and so forth. We can't take that away. But we did see people being beaten up. Why? Because, according to me, you're violating curfew orders. Disha Ravi, brought from Bangalore to Delhi. I have asked so many people that after she got bail, how did she go back to Bangalore? Who paid for her airfare? Did the Delhi police pay for her airfare? Probably not. So you bring a student or a young girl from Bangalore to Delhi on a trumped up charge, sedition, no less. And then when she gets bail, you say, all right, now you make your way home. Where does she get the money from? Where does she stay in Delhi? She gets bail at about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the evening. Where is she going to spend the night? So it's okay to say that, you come along. I want to question you. Come to my place in Delhi. Come to my place in Calcutta. Come to my place in Bangalore. Traveling around is not so simple, particularly in these times. She did not get legal aid. She said, I have a lawyer. I want the assistance of my lawyer. Judge said, no. I'll give you some lawyer who's supposed to be a legal aid lawyer, a bit of a dummy, who knew nothing about the case, did not even open his mouth, and she's put inside for a couple of days. Hate speech. Patricia is right here, a victim of that. She says, don't do this. It's not good. Oh, you're saying it's not good? So therefore you're inciting disaffection. So therefore, probably you didn't get arrested, Patricia, but many other people have got arrested for saying that don't do something wrong. Just by saying don't do something wrong, you're causing disaffection. And people have been to jail for that. Searching a lawyer's office, Mahmood Pracha. How do you defend your client if the cops are going to come day in and day out and say, all right, I want to know what's on your computer? I know that when that Bofors thing happened in Delhi, Vin Chadda's lawyer, the enforcement directorate people came to his office to search his office. There were no computers at that time. The entire bar association said, you can't do it. This is privileged communication. And even though Vin Chadda was, at that time, something very big, Bofors was very big, national headlines and all that, they were not allowed to do this. But today, Delhi riots, you're a lawyer, so therefore you're a conspirator along with that. Witness protection. Now, when I say that you go beyond investigation, witness protection, that person Sengar rapes a girl, she has to self-immolate in front of the house of the chief minister before he wakes up. Her father gets beaten up, dies in jail. She goes to court with her lawyer and her aunts. There's a staged accident. The two aunts get killed. I think the lawyer also succumbs to the injuries a couple of days later. She somehow or the other manages to survive. Now, is that a part of the rule of law? You say, okay, accident ho gaya, theek hai, accident ho gaya. But was it an accident? We need to ask that question. Police officers in prisons. The High Court, Uttarakhand High Court said no, contrary to the rules. But why did that idea strike somebody that you need police officers in prisons? Prevention of damage to public property. People are being penalized for it. But when the police damages public property, CCTV cameras have been damaged in JNU, in Jamia, and in other places. No action taken. The police have broken the headlights and tail lights of motorcycles in Jamia. No action taken. Is it that, the rule of law says that if the state does it, it's okay, but if the people do it, it's not okay. These are the aberrations. Now, again, destruction of property and penalizing the citizens is the law. So it's not illegal or anything, but the inequitable application of the law which is causing a problem. Extrajudicial killings, we've talked about it. Hyderabad, Kanpur, Manipur, 8 persons were convicted of lynching. They were garlanded by a union minister when they got bail. Now, they got bail. They were convicted, by the way, and they got bail in appeal. Perfectly legal. Nothing wrong in garlanding somebody. But should it be done? And what is the message that is being sent to the rule of law? That doesn't matter, even if you lynch a couple of people, how does that matter? A few positives. I mean, it's not that the police is all bad. Few positives. Like I said, they have been helping migrants and they've done a fantastic job in some places. Not reported enough on TV, but they have done an excellent job. Your report talks about the persons in conflict areas having greater confidence in the police rather than in paramilitary forces. I think the police should be proud of it. Whatever the reason, whether they are from the same district or nearby district or whatever. But the fact is that the people have greater trust in them than in the paramilitary forces. Less than the army, but more than the paramilitary forces. Your report also talks about corruption. Perhaps less in conflict areas, but a different kind of corruption. A Robin Hood kind of corruption, where they tap illegal sources. So if somebody is doing something illegal, they take some money from him. Well, it's a Robin Hood kind of situation, but less corruption in these conflict areas. CHRI has come out again with a report. Again, good for the police. Women in police, we need them. The highest is in the state of Tamil Nadu. These are figures of 1st of January 2019, 17.46%. Not good, but better than nothing. The highest in Union Territories, Chandigarh, 13.47%. Again, not good, but better than some of the other places, including Delhi, by the way. Why don't we look at it, from this perspective? There are reforms that need to be taken. Prakash Singh has been fighting for them for a long time. But there are other things also that need to be looked into. It's not that, just say that, all right, everything is fine. Reforms hote rahenge, things will happen, things will improve. If they don't improve, so what? That can't be the answer. But really, I think there are serious challenges to the rule of law, not only from the side of the police or the state, but also the inactivity of the judiciary in being unable or not wanting to check some of these excesses. And these, I think, are challenges not only for the 2020s, but these are the challenges for this year. It's a challenge for this year, it's a challenge for next year. And we have to concentrate on that. We have to remember, I think, eventually, what was said during the American Revolution, that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And unless we make sure that all of us work together, whether it's the police or whether it's the judiciary or any other wing of the state, to maintain the rule of law, to maintain our constitutional rights, we're going to face serious challenges in the 2020s. Thank you very much.